Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, and let me quick do a mic check. AI once, AI twice, AI thrice. Am I audible? Yes. Awesome. Thank you. I know we have invested a large portion of our day discussing about AI, what AI is capable of, what are the AI agentic capabilities that Browser Stack offers. However, accessibility is also a core piece of functionality. We should never differentiate between what a user experience is for a regular user and for people with disabilities. And now that we have been together for almost a day, I know we are all friends. I need your help. I need you to raise your hands if you have ever witnessed accessibility issues when the development is done. Awesome. Please don't shy away because we are not recording the audience. Raise your hands if you ever have to make the tough decision of shipping a product and fixing the accessibility. I feel you. I have been there. Raise your hands if you are seeing the same accessibility issues again and again and again. Yes, we all have been there. So if you raised your hand even once, this session is for you. Because I assure you, by the end of today's session, you will have a sound understanding of why accessibility fails to scale at large organizations. What is born accessible approach and how that is the key to scaling accessibility. How the digital accessibility maturity model helps to evaluate your maturity levels and what scaling actually looks like. And finally, we'll look into the different tools and resources provided by Browser Stack to scale accessibility. I have worked with multiple clients, different products, different teams, different technology stack. But there is one pattern that emerges every single time. Accessibility exists, but only on papers. Policies exist, but the responsibilities are not there. And that's what I called compliance theater, wherein you are working towards proving that you have accessibility, but you are not building for accessibility. When there is zero governance, you're not aware what are the different things you're shipping into the production. And when accessibility is owned by everyone, it's actually not owned by anyone. The next one that you see is, I call the silent killer. Even though you have good policies in place, you have the right intentions, even then accessibility is failing. Why? Because your team is not trained for accessibility. Ask yourself, how often do you train your accessibility teams? How many accessibility certifications do you have in your team? That leads to wrong usage of tools for accessibility. And by the time you reach your QA, the important decisions that shape the accessibility are already being taken. And on top of that, people think accessibility is the last step, and only QA is responsible for it. And when you think that, you also say anybody can test it. I have seen designers creating VPAT or accessibility conformance reports with no accessibility knowledge. And we all know, we all have been part of the testing teams, right? When we fix under pressure, we are just providing the Band-Aid. We are not fixing the wound. And today, I'm here to share my experiences. Because I have been the only expert on the team. I have been the bottleneck. I have been the firefighter. And all those experiences have taught me few lessons. Lessons what works and what does not work. And after years of experience, I have come to a conclusion that born accessible approach is the key to scaling accessibility. Now, when people hear about the word born accessible approach, they think about perfect accessibility from day one. Now, that's technically feasible when you have matured enough. But born accessible approach is the process of building and publishing products where accessibility is the default system behavior and not a last-minute checklist. In simple terms, baking accessibility into the SDLC. That's what born accessible approach is. And I'll show you how we can do it in very simple steps. During the planning phase, before adopting the born accessible approach, we are focused on the business value. We only create stories for user experience, and we are only focused on speed to market. But when we adopt the born accessible approach, we either update our user stories, the features that we have created for UI, or we create separate features for accessibility. We upskill our team. We provide role-based trainings to our designers, developers, and testers. And we also modify our user stories, ensuring the right success criteria are provided, and the definition of done has inclusion or accessibility into it. During the design phase, our designers are focused on creating pixel-perfect designs that works for regular users, users who have good vision, users who can only operate a mouse. After adopting the born accessible approach, they shift their focus on additional personas, people with no vision, people with low vision, or people with limited hand movements, people who are dependent on keyboard. They come up with accessibility annotations, ensuring there is no ambiguity when the design handoff happens to your dev team members. And finally, they get their designs reviewed by an accessibility expert, ensuring we are catching accessibility concerns earlier in the life cycle. A perfect example of shift-left approach. I truly believe designers are the true enablers of accessibility. And when designs are provided with accessibility annotations, the number one thing that removes is the guesswork. If there are no annotations, your developers are thinking, what is H2 or H3 on this page? What should be the alternate text for the image? The call to action button that is provided, whether that is a link or a button. But after adopting the approach, you have accessibility annotations baked into the design. You have clarity. Because we are talking about the large organizations, every single team is in itself a small team, a small organization within that. So they end up creating their own bunch of components, which impacts your brand. There is no consistency in the look and feel, and accessibility is always different. Because you adopt the born accessible approach, you have design systems. That's a central repository of components, which is brand and WCAG compliant. And lastly, because you have trained your developers, they start using the right AI plugins and tools. Now, if your designers are the true enablers of accessibility, your testers are the last line of defense. As I said earlier, people think that functional testers can also perform accessibility testing. But accessibility testing is a niche. You need to have certain skill set to become an accessibility tester. Without the right knowledge, they end up using wrong tools. And I have seen teams, there was a product owner who came to me and said, Param, Google's Lighthouse gave me 100 accessibility score. So are we good enough to ship it? That is actually the starting point. Automated scans can only scan up to 30% depending upon the complexity of the application. After adopting the born accessible approach, you have skilled testers on the team who are only focused for accessibility testing. Standardizing the tools we were discussing earlier in the roundtable. One of my friends mentioned that their team have adopted a certain set of tools, but their developers have not. So this is where you have to standardize what tools you're using at every phase of the SDLC so that you are comparing apples to apples when you're testing it. And finally, you are not only limited to the automated scans only, you're performing manual checks as well. And you don't limit yourself only to automated and manual checks. You perform usability studies with real people with disabilities. Because that's where you test for the user flows which are critical to your application, because you're building for people with disabilities. Then we have guardrails, which we also called as monitoring. Without born accessible approach, you're hoping, or rather, you're praying you're not getting a lawsuit. And the only way you get to know about it is when you get a user complaint. But with born accessible approach, you have right checks in place, wherein you are not allowing team to go live without getting a WCAG sign-off. Now, I'm not saying you have to stop the teams from going live. They might be delivering a critical functionality, but you are putting a check in place. Give them conditional sign-offs. Ask for commitments. When are they going to fix the high severity, which are impacting the end users? Then you also track the progress of different teams. What we have done is we have created a very healthy competition at Guardian, wherein every month we send out a monthly leaderboard. Depending upon what is their existing conformance score, how many issues have they modified or remediated. So that's how you can adopt the born accessible approach, ensuring you're moving from being reactive to proactive. Now, born accessible approach is not about doing the additional work. It's about doing the right thing earlier in the life cycle so that you can avoid the costly mistakes later. Now, if born accessible approach is the vision, maturity models such as digital accessibility maturity model is the medium to reach that. And it solves 3 core problems. As I said, it moves from being reactive to proactive. You have a clear focus areas in which you need to invest more, be it design, development, or testing. You are adopting the SDLC. You're baking accessibility into your SDLC, so you have intentional sequencing. Next, you are having a shared responsibility, wherein every member of your team is clear what they need to do, be it a product owner, a train lead, a developer, a designer, or a tester. And lastly, it protects you. Once you are made aware that what needs to be fixed and what are the areas that require improvements, you partner with the right accessibility vendors, ensuring you are investing wisely. Do you need usability studies? Do you need accessibility audits being done? Do you need accessibility trainings being done from the external vendors? That's the clarity it provides. Now and before we get into the different levels, what are the ways you can measure it? There are 5 different levels. You begin with initial, where you're being reactive. You're performing ad hoc accessibility testing and fixing as and when the issues are arriving. At level 2, we have repeatable, where certain teams have adopted the repeatable processes, but it is not adopted across the organization. At level 3, we have defined, wherein you have your roles being defined, you know what right tools you need to use, your policies are in place, your governance is in place. At level 4, you have managed, where you are actively tracking the progress of your teams. At last, we have optimizing, wherein you are actually becoming the industry leaders in the space. Others in the space are actually following you. They are looking at how you have scaled accessibility. Accessibility actually matures at level 3 and above. Before that, you are still struggling and still looking for ways. Now, talking about the different dimensions, I call it as the 7 pillars as well. It always begins with the right governance and policies. You must have accessibility policies in place, which talks about what are the accessibility standards you need to follow, what laws you need to adhere to, what happens when you are getting into a partnership with an external vendor, What are the different roles and responsibilities? Then we have communications. I was working for a client. We were having accessibility training scheduled for their developers and testers. Among 5,000 to 6,000 people, only 50 members showed up. We later figured out the channels that we were using were not used by all of them. That's where you need to provide clear communication channels, helping your team being aware that there are accessibility trainings available to them. The other example that I can think of is the great progress that we did for that client was not getting communicated to their senior leadership. So they were not aware that the accessibility program exists and what is the progress that we have made. Then, as we spoke about baking accessibility into your SDLC, it's all about making sure that accessibility becomes the DNA of your organization. Next, we have support. What happens when you have already shipped your product to the end users? Have you provided any communication channels for them to report any issues? And if you have provided, are they accessible? That's where you need to work on. Next is procurement. I usually tie procurement with our governance and policies because that's where you mention what needs to be done when you're getting into a partnership. It's all about making sure that you're having a clear expectation that you will be partnering with a WCAG compliant vendor. And if they are not there yet, what is the path that they have divided? What is the roadmap that they have? Next is all about knowledge and skills. It's our responsibility as people leaders to ensure that the right trainings are in place, right resources are in place to remove any guesswork, make them skilled enough that they can build accessibility by scratch, by default. Then it's all about culture. I often say this, accessibility is not a checklist issue. It's your culture. It should be embedded deeply into the culture. What happens when no one is watching? What happens when your product owner has missed a requirement in the user story? Will your designer and developer focus on accessibility or not? And that's all the 7 pillars that are built against which you will be evaluated when you partner with an external vendor to evaluate your maturity levels. The end goal is actually moving from chaos to clarity. And that's what digital accessibility maturity model and the born accessible approach is here to do. And there are signs that you are maturing. You will find fewer issues. Rather than having repeatable patterns of accessibility issues coming again and again, you will have clear patterns of inclusive and accessible solutions. Secondly, the decisions that we spoke about. Accessibility will not be seen as the last step into the testing. You will plan for it. You will make sure that the design systems are there in place for consistent look and feel. And finally, it's all about the culture that you have built. Lastly, the subject matter experts that you have on your team becomes a multiplier, wherein they have enabled your teams to self-serve, ensuring that they have the right knowledge, access to the right tools, and the subject matter is focused on the overall strategy. How Browser Stack can help? As Mukul and the others on the team were talking about the different AI tools that they have, the AI agents, they briefly touched upon the accessibility tools. I'm going to show you what they have. During the planning, they have robust dashboards, wherein you can understand where your accessibility is breaking, which success criteria are having the issues, and then you can set up bi-weekly, monthly scans to track the progress of different assets that you have. The seamless Jira integration that they spoke about is also a game changer, wherein with a one click, you can have all your accessibility issues transferred into your Jira. During design, they offer component level and layout level accessibility checks, wherein it scans your Figma files for any accessibility issues. And accessibility annotations are generated automatically. Your designers have to simply review those accessibility annotations. During the dev phase, it's all about finding the accessibility issues as and when your developer is actually writing the code. So the linter that they have is actually when you write the code, it highlights any accessibility issues. They also have MCP servers to which you can ask to build components. For example, a pop-up, a tab panel. With one single line of code, you can ask it to build those components. CLI, you can put in checks before you push your code, what accessibility issues are there that can be flagged. Then for your testing team members, for both web and app testing, you have workflow analyzers. It's like a Chrome plugin or a browser plugin that you can use to identify any accessibility issues. In one of the previous sessions, they mentioned they have around 30,000 devices. So they have enabled screen reader testing on those devices, which means you're not dependent upon a developer who is having an Android device to fix a bug. You simply assign the bug to your developer and ask them to use the browser stack remote devices. And then they also provided assisted tests. I believe accessibility that is dependent upon a hero will fail. But accessibility that is baked into your systems will help you scale. Thank you. What questions do you have for me? And in case you want to connect with me, this is the QR code for my LinkedIn. Yes, please.
Yeah, so one of the issues that I've always seen with accessibility is convincing clients that there's practically no ROI from their perspective for some clients. That spending the man hours, which in turn costs money for them, actually is worth it. For product owners, for certain clients, it obviously makes a lot of sense, especially when you're up to 12% of your user base having accessibility issues. How would you basically spin this and say, look, this is really important. You need to implement this for whatever reason?
Absolutely. And that's actually a problem with most of the clients. And there are 3 different ways to address that concern. You always begin with the human side of it. As somebody said in the morning, 1 in 6 people in the States have some form of disability. So it's the right thing to do. Sometimes that works with your client and sometimes it does not. Secondly, it's all about the untapped market. Last I checked, it is around $500 billion for people with disabilities and their families and friends. If your product is not accessible to those people, you're losing money, you're losing revenue there. The third, and I use this as the last resort, is compliancy. Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 508, Title 2, requires any digital accommodation which is public must be made accessible. And they are lucky if nobody has registered a complaint against them. So those are the 3 things that I would use.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question regarding scalable. While we're talking about, for instance, Lighthouse, you did mention that 30% is the max that it's able to scan based on the complexity. So now when we talk about the accessibility testing that's available in this particular suite, so where do we stand? Definitely, it's not going to be 100% right, but to what level is it matured at this point in time?
Yeah, great point. It's up to 30 to 40%. Automation scans, I'll give you an example. We test for whether an image is having an alternate text or not. But the quality of an alternate text cannot be tested with these tools. That's where you need a human in the loop. Accessibility testing, as I mentioned, is a combination of your automated tools manual checks, and usability studies. Even if you are starting at automation tools and manual checks, you are missing the critical piece. Because testing is performed by accessibility experts. Usability study is performed by real people with disabilities. So you have to use all three.
The next question is regarding, when it comes to accessibility, it's not only about the websites, it's also about the documents that get uploaded, right? So at this point in time, the team for accessibility on the documents, they use different tools like Adobe and other stuff. Is that also something that's covered in the suite of accessibility that we have here, or is it only related to the sites?
That should be a question for the browser stacking, but the ones that I have listed are mostly for your web applications, mobile applications. For PDFs and Word documents, there are different tools, PSAT. I'm fading on the full form of that application, but they do provide those plugins. But again, those plugins must be the starting point, not the end.
Sorry, just to add to that, yes, browser does have a solution for document accessibility. And in fact, like, we're expanding that, also having accessibility of, say, pick by designs and so on. So yeah, we are trying to cover the whole spectrum.
Let's see if I can get this question out properly. So if I picture what you're describing here is you have defined what you would like to have your accessibility testing or your environment look like, right? What's required of it. Now, have you found any difficulties? Usually that's like not a top level down sort of thing. Sometimes this is like, okay, one group figured it out. How do you get it from there to like really take hold across the whole organization?
Yeah, and that's where maturity levels that we spoke about, level 3 defined comes into the picture. You always start with a small team. You perform POCs, and then you scale. When you see if something is working for one team and you're getting good results, that's how you scale. The number one thing that we did was standardizing the tools. Your designers, developers, and testers are using the same set of tools. So when you are testing for accessibility, your developers and testers are not finding two different issues. And same thing when you are performing usability studies and accessibility audits with third-party vendors, you are using the same tools. So it's all about standardizing the different processes in place, different tools as well.
But the key sounds like it's also proving that it's making a positive difference.
Yes.
Which you've spoken some about too, and how to feed that back. So
exactly.
Thank you.
The external audits that we perform are the true reflection of it, because those are not biased. Your internal teams can be biased, right? So that's critical to have third-party vendors.
If I have to go back to the team and say like, okay, these are the inspiration sites for you guys to take a look at it, because when we start building accessibility, like the look and feel aesthetics and other things we lose a bit, right? So that's where the topic is, where we strike the balance. According to you, what is that one or two sites that I can pass on to the team as an inspiration for them to look at it, which is perfect according to you?
The one that I'm currently working on is Guardian Life Insurance. Search for it, Guardian Life Insurance. The other ones would be our accessibility partners, BrowserStack, right? So these are the two sites that you can go and check for accessibility. Yes?
Is there an accessibility score we should be always looking for in terms of achievement and for a website to be compliant?
Yes and no, because even after scoring 100 accessibility score within an accessibility audit, your usability can still fail. That's where I said it's automation, manual checks, and usability studies. To benchmark your internal teams, you can say 85% and above. And again, you must perform usability studies to ensure that those are actually working for end users. But 85% to 95% is the mark that you are in a good shape for accessibility.
Is there a way we can bridge these gap? If there is anything we can find, tie back to the accessibility and usability standpoint, is there anything we can bridge?
So scoring is done purely based upon the technical aspects of the application. Have you used the right HTML semantics or not? The ARIA attributes, if you're aware, are working correctly or not. Elements are in the tabbing order or not. If I'm a keyboard-only user, can I press enter and trigger the call to action or not? Usability study does not work, is not based on those nuances, because you perform usability studies with real participants who have some sort of disability. So you don't focus on getting a score out of it. You are trying to get their experiences out of those studies. So that's the divide between usability studies and accessibility audits.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Okay, if not, thank you so much for listening to me.